Our story begins in a small quiet town of southwestern Iowa. At the turn of the 20th century, Villisca, Iowa was your typical tight-knit community. Trains could be heard rolling down the tracks throughout the southern part of town. Little children played in the streets, rode their bicycles on the neatly paved sidewalk, and families enjoyed picnics in the park after going to church on Sunday morning. The night of June 12, 1912, was your typical Sunday night for the Moore family. The family enjoyed their evening at the local Presbyterian church, hosting a children's event for the congregation's friends and families. However, this night would end with a crime so horrific, the town of Villisca would become infamous across the globe. In the early 1900s, Villisca was a bustling railroad town. More than 24 passenger and freight trains stopped at the depot each day. The town sported several hotels, restaurants, stores, theaters, and manufacturers. Within this thriving environment lived Josiah B. Moore, one of Villisca's most prominent businessmen. The owner and operator of the Moore Implement Company, John Deere Company franchise, he was a solid competitor with other area businesses. On December 6, 1899, Josiah married Sarah Montgomery at the home of her parents. The couple would have 4 children: Herman, Catherine, Boyd, and Paul. J.B., as Josiah was familiarly called, and his wife, Sarah, were well liked in the community. Active in the Presbyterian Church, and described as being friendly and helpful to their neighbors. On Sunday, June 9, 1912, the Moore family, as well as the Stillinger family, attended church. An annual event was also held Sunday evening called the Children's Day Program, which had been coordinated by Sarah Moore. That evening, 9-year-old Catherine Moore invited her friends, 12-year-old Lena Stillinger, and her sister, 7-year-old Ina, for a sleepover. The girls accepted, and after the program ended at 9:30 p.m., the Moore family, along with the Stillinger sisters, walked home from the church, arriving about 9:45 and 10 p.m. The next morning, Moore's neighbor, Mary Peckham, noticed that the Moores were not outside taking care of their regular chores. The house was unusually still. Between 7 o'clock and 8 a.m., she knocked on the door, but received no answer. When she tried to open the door, she found it to be locked. Concerned, she called Josiah's brother, Ross Moore. When Ross Moore arrived, he knocked loudly on the front door and shouted, attempting to raise someone inside the house. He then tried to look through the windows, but found all of the curtains drawn or the windows covered. He then produced his spare key and entered the family's home. Ross Moore frantically ran to the front porch and cried out for Mary Peckham to call the sheriff. What he had seen was shocking. The entire Josiah Moore family had been murdered, as well as the 2 young, overnight guests, all bludgeoned with an axe while they slept. In the upstairs master bedroom, lay 43-year-old Josiah Moore and 39-year-old Sarah Moore, both bludgeoned in the head. Their bed linens stained heavily with blood. In the adjacent upstairs bedrooms were the Moore children. 11-year-old Herman, 10-year-old Mary Catherine, 7-year-old Boyd, and 5-year-old Paul, were also bludgeoned in the head while they slept. In the main level guest room, the bodies of Lena Stillinger, age 12, and her sister Ina, age 8, were also found dead, killed in the same manner as the family. Villisca City Marshal, Hank Horton, arrived quickly, soon followed by other officers. In the meantime, the gruesome news spread like wildfire, and within no time, neighbors and curious onlookers converged on the house. Law enforcement quickly lost control of the crime scene, and it is said that as many as 100 gawkers traipsed through the house before the Villisca National Guard arrived and cordoned off the home. The investigation revealed the horrendous acts of this axe murderer. Shortly after midnight, on June 10, 1912, a stranger, hefting an axe, lifted the latch on the back door of the 2-story timber house. The door was not locked. Break-ins was not the sort of thing you worried about in a modestly prosperous Midwest settlement of no more than 2,000 people, all known to one another by sight. The visitor was able to slip inside, silently, and close the door behind him. Then, according to a reconstruction, attempted by the town coroner the next day, he took an oil lamp from a dresser, removed the chimney, and placed it out of the way, under a chair, bending the wick in two, to minimize the flame. He lit the lamp, and turned it down so low, that it cast only the faintest glimmer, in the sleeping house. The stranger carefully walked past one room, in which two girls lay sleeping, and slipped up the narrow wooden stairs that led to the two other bedrooms. He ignored one, in which four more young children were sleeping, and crept into the room in which 43-year-old Joe Moore lay next to his wife, Sarah. Raising the axe high above his head, high enough that it gouged the ceiling, the man brought the flat of the blade down on the back of Joe Moore's head, crushing his skull and killing him instantly. Then, he struck Sarah a blow, before she had time to wake or register his presence. Leaving the couple dead or dying, the killer went next door, and used the axe, to kill the four more children as they slept. There is no evidence that Herman, Catherine, Boyd, or Paul, woke before they died. Nor did the assailant, or any of the four children make sufficient noise to disturb Catherine's two friends, Lena and Ina Stillinger, as they slept downstairs. The killer then descended the stairs and took his axe to the Stillinger girls, the elder of whom may finally have awakened, an instant before she too was murdered. What happened next marked the Villisca killings as truly peculiar, and still sends shivers down the spine, a century after the fact. The axe man went back upstairs, and systematically reduced the heads of all six Moores, to a bloody pulp. Striking Joe alone an estimated 30 times, and leaving the faces of all six members of the family completely unrecognizable. He then drew up the bedclothes to cover Joe and Sarah's shattered heads, placed a gauze undershirt over Herman's face, and a dress over Catherine's, covered Boyd and Paul as well, and finally administered the same terrible post-mortem punishment to the girls downstairs, before touring the house, and ritually hanging cloths over every mirror and piece of glass. At some point, the killer also took a 2-pound slab of uncooked bacon from the icebox, wrapped it in a towel, and left it on the floor of the downstairs bedroom, close to a short piece of key chain that did not belong to the Moores. He seems to have stayed inside the house for quite some time, filling a bowl with water and washing his bloody hands in it. Sometime before 5 a.m., he abandoned the lamp at the top of the stairs and left as silently as he had come, making sure to lock the doors behind him. Taking the house keys, the murderer vanished as the sun rose, blood red in the sky. The murders convulsed Villisca, particularly after a few clumsy and futile attempts to search the surrounding countryside for a transient killer, failed to unearth a likely suspect. The simple truth was that there was no sign of the murderer's whereabouts. He might have vanished back into his own home nearby, equally, given a head start of up to 5 hours, in a town at which nearly 30 trains called every day, where he might easily have made good his escape. Bloodhounds were tried without success. After that, there was little for the townspeople to do, but gossip, swap theories, and strengthen their locks. The most obvious suspect may have been Frank Jones, a tough local businessman and state senator who was also a prominent member of Villisca's Methodist Church. Edgar Epperly, the leading authority on the murders, reports that the town quickly split along religious lines. The Methodists insisting on Jones's innocence, and the Moores Presbyterian congregation convinced of his guilt. Though never formally charged with any involvement in the murders, Jones became the subject of a grand jury investigation, and a prolonged campaign to prove his guilt, which destroyed his political career. Many townspeople were certain he used his considerable influence to have the case against him quashed. For others, though, there was a far stronger and far stranger candidate for the axe man. His name was Lynn George Jacqueline Kelly. He was an English immigrant, a preacher and a known sexual deviant, with well-recorded mental problems. He had been in the town on the night of the murders, and freely admitted that he had left on a dawn train, just before the bodies were discovered. He was left-handed, and Coroner Lindquist had determined, from an examination of blood spatters in the murder house, that the killer probably swung his axe that way. Kelly was obsessed with sex, and had been caught peering into windows in Villisca 2 days before the murders. Investigation soon made plain that there were links between Lynn Kelly and the Moore family. Most sinister, for those who believed in the little preacher's guilt, was the fact that Kelly had attended the Children's Day service, held at Villisca's Presbyterian Church on the evening of the murders. The service had been organized by Sarah Moore and her children. Together with Lena and Ina Stillinger, they played prominent parts, dressed up in their Sunday best. Many in Villisca were willing to believe that Kelly had spotted the family in the church, and became obsessed with them, and that he had spied on the Moore household, as they went to bed that evening. The idea that the killer had lain in wait for the Moores to go to sleep was supported by some evidence. Lindquist's investigation had revealed a depression in some bales of hay, stored in the family barn. There was a knot hole in the side of the barn, through which the murderer could have watched the house, while reclining in comfort. It took time for the case against Kelly to get anywhere. In 1917, another grand jury finally assembled to hear the evidence, linking him with Lena's murder. At first glance, the case against Kelly seemed compelling. He had sent bloody clothing to the laundry in nearby Macedonia, and an elderly couple recalled meeting the preacher when he alighted from a 5:19 a.m. train from Villisca that June 10th, and being told that gruesome murders had been committed in the town. A hugely incriminating statement, since the preacher had left Villisca 3 hours before the killings were discovered. It also emerged that Kelly had returned to Villisca a week later, and shown great interest in the murders, even posing as a Scotland Yard detective to obtain a tour of the Moore house. Arrested in 1917, the Englishman was repeatedly interrogated, and eventually signed a confession to the murder in which he stated, "I killed the children upstairs first, and the children downstairs last. I knew God wanted me to do it this way. Slay utterly came to my mind, and I picked up the axe, went into the house, and killed them." This he later recanted, and the couple who claimed to have spoken to him on the morning after murders, changed their story. With little left to tie him firmly to the killings, the first grand jury to hear Kelly's case hung 11-1 in favor of refusing to indict him, and a second panel freed him. In the end, the police and investigators gave up in 1917. The murders remained unsolved, and the killer unpunished. Today, the remains of those murdered by the mysterious Axeman lie in the Villisca cemetery. The walls of the pristine home still protect the identity of a murderer who hacked the community to its core. While the members of the household have passed on, the spirits of the violent act remain. In 2010, Travel Channel's crew from the hit TV show Ghost Adventures traveled to the Axe murder house for an investigation. Here are some clips of the findings from their investigation.
Is this the axe that you used to kill 8 people?
Just then, my digital recorder captured an EVP that sounds like an evil spirit laughing at my questions.
Is this the axe that you used? You want to keep killing? Push this axe on my face. Show me that you're still here and you're still hurting people. You need to leave them alone.
This EVP response was actually captured on Nick's digital recorder.
Show me that you're still here and you're still hurting people. You need to leave them alone.
And right on the bed were Herman, Paul, Catherine, Boyd. They were all laying here when their lives were suddenly taken from them. What church were you at before you came home? What church were you at before you came home?
After Nick captured that EVP and left the room, 4 minutes later, our motion-activated night vision camera was triggered by what appears to be a dark mist. Was it following Nick?
Are the halls of the Axe murder house still reliving the tragic events of the past? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section down below. And never forget, when things go bump in the night, it's on the witching hour.